Hi, we're activating. Oh, hello. Yeah, I don't want to leave YouTube people in the dark, specifically because they've been so happy and thrilled, because they're not just, there's a lot of people who just don't use Twitch. I understand, like, why join an entirely separate website when you love using your YouTubes, and they like watching live shows on YouTubes, and so they're very vocal about that. It's also turned me into a 600 or 700 Andy, which is fucking really exciting. And also it just gets me that, like, you know, this is something I could have been doing for so long but just haven't had the ability to do so that's amazing as well. I'm gonna have Binder audio now. No, my audio is still pretty good. Damn, depressed progressive, thank you so much for the 1,000 biddies. That's very generous of you. I am now less depressed because I got paid. All right, here's the oh yeah, sorry, I gotta do the intro for the YouTube peeps. It's the Serfs, it's the Surf Show. This is the theme to the Surf Show. Da, da, da. It's your favorite song. Everybody loves it. That's why you watch the show. You watch it for the theme song.
8/9/2023. The world is ravaged by a plague. You know what I'm talking about, the Rona. We're talking about the capitalistic death cult that values profits over the long-term health of humanity. What can be done to stop them and save the future of civilization? Find out only on Hard News.
I'm going to change the title. I'm going to change everything. I just want to quickly say, everyone who's watching, I am getting a huge a volume of emails right now into the Serfs email. A lot of them are very nice and well-wishing and just people trying to send me clips and stuff like that. Some of them are very, very angry people who are writing stuff that is horrifying. And by the way, I just want to say to everyone who's writing the hate letters being like, oh, you want to murder Israelis or things like that, that's just not the case. And also, when you write those letters and then add a whole bunch of, like, you know, racialized shit at the end, being like, oh, blah blah blah, you fucking white native, blah, blah, shit like that, you know what that does? That reinforces the fact that you know, you're not winning in the hearts and minds of people when you do that shit. I'm just gonna be frank with you. Yeah, like, no one's gonna read an email like that and then be like, oh, perhaps I was wrong. I should rethink all of my views and beliefs and morals right now on the spot. It's more like, oh, wow, this is abhorrent. And yeah, okay. But to people who are sending me very nice, you know, letters with like, hey, Lance, have you seen this clip? Hey, Lance, have you seen this clip? There's so many of them. Like, the inbox is like this. So in the morning, as I'm trying to get through a lot of them, it's like at this point, the volume is getting just like unprocessable. If you have clips you want me to watch, use the Ghoulery. Upload them to the Ghoulery. Put them there. That's what it's there for. Please start using the Ghoulery. All you got to do is go to reddit.com/r/theserfstv. The Ghoulery is there. You can upload the clip. If it's a long video and there's a specific time, please put a timestamp, because if it's a 2-hour video, I just don't have the time to watch the full 2 hours until it gets to the part you're talking about. Go use the Ghoulery. Post it there. Use it there. It's got to be the easiest way for me to be able to look at the clips you're trying to send me, because otherwise, like, you know, sometimes, I'll be honest with you, sometimes, yeah, the emails are getting so wild that, like, I'm going through some of them and it just, like, it can turn you off from reading them for a little while. So you're just like, okay, that's enough internet in that corner for the day. So if you have clips and you want me to see them and you're like, oh, why hasn't he answered that email or something like that? A, it's because of the volume of them. B, it's because of the hate mail. And C, it's just like there's too much, like, post it in the Ghoulery. Post in the Ghoulery. Ghoulery is there for you to send the clips in and use them. And also other people can see them as well. So everyone has the ability to use them. And other streamers as well. Streamers, this is not an exclusively Surf thing. Go use the Ghoulery if you want to use it. If you're a streamer and you want to find a whole bunch of clips of ghouls being ghouls and you want to laugh at them or make fun of them or criticize them, you can use it. Go to the Ghoulery. You know, it's public access, you know, in every way, shape, or form. I'm just going to quickly talk about Wexit for 2 seconds, just because it's a little lighter before we start talking about all the heavy stuff.
Time for Money Matters Update. Here's our financial expert, Rubina Ahmed-Haq. Rubina, good morning to you. And we're going to start with the Federal Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, who is meeting with her provincial counterparts to discuss Alberta's proposed withdrawal from the Canadian Pension Plan. Can you give us some context here and just how concerned should Canadians be about this potential move?
So they should be very concerned. So she's meeting with the
I'm just gonna give a background to everyone who's like, "What's Alberta? What's that? What's the CPP?" So Alberta is a province in Canada, and Alberta recently elected our version, the Canadian version, of Marjorie Taylor Greene, in that she is a conspiracy theorist of the highest order. She's a massive ass racist, and she has power as the premier of the province. So for all of you in America complaining about Marjorie Taylor Greene, being like, "Oh, that Marjorie Taylor Greene sure is a scamp," yeah, you're not wrong. She certainly is, and it's going to be awesome to laugh at her in a couple minutes at how she's completely failed at getting Rashida Tlaib evicted or censored or kicked out of Congress. But in the meantime, just know that they've been trying for a while to separate themselves from Canada. They've tried a couple things, turned out they're just completely politically ineffective at doing most everything, so luckily they haven't succeeded. But yeah, their idea is either Alberta becomes an independent province, not 100% a sovereign nation, because they realize that's going to be financially devastating, so they kind of want it all. They want to both kind of have autonomy over anything they do, but also get a lot of federal funding and money necessary to power a lot of their healthcare and other programs like that. So yeah, it's clown shoes. But now they're just trying to trickle away at other things.
the finance ministers across the province, across the country from provinces, to talk about Alberta's proposal to leave CPP and create their own pension plan, as Quebec has. Quebec has the QPP. And so they want to leave. They feel they're not getting good value out of the CPP. But the problem is, if they were to leave, this breakup, which they're saying would be like a divorce happening, could really financially destabilize the CPP. And Chrystia Freeland, of course, wants to avoid that. She doesn't want Alberta to leave the Canada Pension Plan. Some calculations say that they could be owed almost half of what the assets are. That some people have criticized that, saying that that's an overestimation, but it would still be a significant chunk of the CPP would be given to Alberta as their payments and investments that have gone up in the last 40, 50 years. And that would have a huge impact on CPP for rest of Canada as well.
Robina, the head of the Bank of Canada, said this week that government spending is putting pressure on inflation, and it would be helpful if monetary and fiscal policy were rowing in the same direction. Are the government and bank at odds? Is this keeping prices high?
I don't think they're at odds. I think he was making a comment about what is actually happening in the economy. So the expectation is that inflation will be at 2% by 2025. So we're going to have higher inflation throughout the 2024 year. And part of that reason, he's saying, is increased government spending on things like affordable housing and other programs.
Twitch didn't notify me of the stream. It's a frequent problem. Twitch, for some reason, doesn't like my politics, I guess, or something I do. I don't get all these kind of like, people are like, oh, I discovered you by seeing you on the blah blah blah. I'm like, that doesn't happen to me. I don't get that the kind of stuff. Yeah, so yeah. But hey, as always, if you want to see any single time the surf goes live and where it's live, you can just go to the Discord. We always make the announcements. That's where you're always 100% guaranteed to see any notification as to when Twitch is when we're live.
That are set to be announced in the fall economic statement that will put more money in pockets of those who are struggling the most. So that, of course,
what's weird is YouTube does. Like, people are always like, oh, I just got a notification that the surf's live on YouTube.
Allows them to spend more money in the economy, which keeps inflation higher. So I don't know if it was a question of him saying, they should or shouldn't be doing it, but really making a statement as to this is why we are going to see higher inflation in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, to me, it's kind of comical that Alberta is still doing this. And like, I mean, I feel bad for anyone who's, center to the left in Alberta, because, you got a far right extremist as your premier. That fucking sucks. And like, it's nonstop silly shit coming out of that fucking province as well. That's too bad. Speaking of silly shit, there's finally a U.S. senator that has called for a ceasefire. It's finally happened. And like I said, I'm hoping this is going to be a domino effect where most people don't want to be on the wrong side of history. And before you all say, about time, Bernie, nope. Dick Durbin. Now, for people asking, because I didn't have time to play the video yesterday, a ceasefire is different than a humanitarian corridor in such that there are going to be international bodies that are going to observe and make sure that the ceasefire remains intact between both parties and that it can't be broken until one of the two sides does so. Whereas a humane corridor is a pause in the bombing campaigns to perhaps allow for some supply and food and fuel to trickle in, you know, some water so people don't have to keep drinking sewage, which to me is just unbelievably disgusting and inhumane in its own way. To be like, we would like to, you know, ask for a humanitarian pause temporarily to allow the flow of some essential stuff in there. And then it's like, and then what happens afterwards? Well, then, you know, they resume the strategic campaign in order to destroy Hamas. And so it's like, well, that means that people who are currently starving, because they have been cut off from all food, fuel, water, medical supplies. Water has been reopened in certain parts of it. There are certain parts of Gaza that do not have it. And there are lots and lots of stories coming out of people who are now suffering from dehydration and, yes, drinking fucking sewage water. So a humanitarian corridor is not going to cut it. A demand for an immediate ceasefire is the first step. And then, yes, people will have to start pressuring the government. Like, in my opinion, there's no coming back from this. I really, really hope this is not going to be one of those things where after the death toll is calculated and the numbers are absolutely horrifying and everyone is like, wow. And then there's, you know, a little pause for peace. What happens to the over 42% of homes that have been destroyed or damaged? What happens to the million people who do not have homes or structural homes to return to? What's the next step here? Because we've seen the plan currently that is being said out loud by members of the Israeli government, high-end officials of the Israeli government. They're not hiding what they're doing. They've said pretty explicitly that they want to siege and then remove Palestinians from Gaza. That is the ultimate goal here. And as horrifying as it is to see this play out, it's one of those things where there is a ton of academic scholars right now, and including Jewish scholars of very high regard. You can watch a lot of their interviews on Democracy Now!, who are saying that we are witnessing a genocide. This is genocidal intent. This is ethnic cleansing. You can choose the terms you want to describe it. We are seeing, again, high-end officials who are stating that they want to remove Palestinians from Gaza. And it's one of those things where the West is like, it's complicated. It is very complicated. I completely agree that the solution is very complex, especially because, like, if you look at the West Bank and the way that it's so subdivided now and all these, like, and this is with intent, by the way, all these roads and routes that are going through it would be very difficult to say the West Bank can simply just become its own independent state. Now, for everyone who's also been saying that Palestine isn't a country, Palestine, I believe, in 1988 is when they were officially recognized as a sovereign state. I believe 70 to 80% of the world has voted in favor of that. Obviously, Israel and the U.S. have not. But to say that it's not an internationally recognized country, in my assessment, is simply doing that to justify what is happening currently. And so, yeah. First step, demand a ceasefire, and then there also has to be an end to the illegal occupation of Palestine, an end to the apartheid system that divides two separate people. I'm going to show you an incredible interview coming up pretty shortly. That it's one of those interviews where I'm sure you might have seen the viral clips that Ryan Grimm, for example, posted it. Nina Turner posted it. This interview is absolutely sensational because it's a first-hand account of someone who had gone to occupied territory and what life is like there. And what exactly he's like, you know, it's one of those things that you can never unsee ever. And he's like, he's one of those things where once you've actually set foot in it and you've seen firsthand what it's like, there's no walking back from that. There is absolutely no, it's complicated in your mind. It all becomes crystal clear, you know. But here we are. Dick Durbin is the first U.S. senator to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. Thank you for listening to tens of thousands of Jews calling for peace, wrote Jewish American advocacy group If Not Now. Democrat Senator Dick Durbin on Thursday became the first U.S. senator to call for a ceasefire in Gaza and Israel, joining the head of the United Nations, human rights organizations, nearly 24 House progressives, and now the entire federal NDP. Durbin, the number 2 Senate Democrat, said during a CNN appearance that he supports a ceasefire agreement that includes the immediate release of all hostages. An effort should be made to engage in conversation between Israelis and Palestinians, said Durbin. Let's face it, this has gone on for decades. Whatever the rationale from the beginning, it has now reached an intolerable level. We need to have a resolution in the Middle East that gives some promise for the future. Durbin said he has not communicated his position directly to the Biden White House, which has thus far vocally opposed the ceasefire, claiming it would only benefit Hamas. On Wednesday, President Joe Biden expressed support for a pause after his campaign speech in Minnesota was interrupted by a demonstrator calling for a ceasefire. If Not Now, a Jewish American advocacy group, has organized protests in the U.S. that support protests against the U.S. support for Israeli atrocities in Gaza. Welcome Durbin's ceasefire call, writing on social media. Thank you for listening to tens of thousands of Jews calling for peace. We appreciate and hope your colleagues in the Senate follow your leadership. Durbin's support for a ceasefire came a day after Senator Bernie Sanders took to the Senate floor to demand a humanitarian pause to allow the delivery of aid to Gaza, where more than 9,000 people have been killed by Israeli forces in less than a month of bombing. The United Nations defines a humanitarian pause as a, quote, temporary cessation of hostilities purely for humanitarian purposes. That is usually for a defined period of time, specific geographical area where the humanitarian activities are to be carried out. And then the bombing returns. And honestly, if you haven't been paying attention to the conflict right now, one of the first acts was to cut off Gaza from all food, fuel, water, and medical supplies. And people there were already, I should say, before this, suffering immensely. And now in this, it's like, you know, we're looking at crimes against humanity. And at that point, if you're like, well, let's put a temporary pause and let's feed them some crumbs. Okay, get them some medicine. You know, we're hearing reports of doctors drinking IV bags and women having to go through C-sections without any anesthetic at all. So imagine what that could be like. Children, by the way, who have third-degree burns on their bodies, who currently do not have any pain medication. There's absolutely nothing that can be given to them. So that's bad. So we'll get a little flow in there. We'll put a temporary pause in this. And then we return to that afterwards, after the pause, you know, and then we all get to pat ourselves on the back. We all got to say, well, I wasn't directly endorsing, you know, the slaughter of civilians and all that. I wasn't doing that. I was calling for a humanitarian pause, and then they could resume their campaign against Hamas, to destroy Hamas. Yeah. A ceasefire, by contrast, entails a suspension of fighting agreed upon by the parties in the conflict, typically as part of a political process. It is intended to be long-term and often covers the entire geographical area of the conflict. Its aim is usually to allow parties to engage in dialogue, including the possibility of reaching a permanent political settlement. Including Durbin, 23 members of Congress have expressed support for a ceasefire, according to a tally by The Intercept. So this is why I keep saying, everyone, please keep contacting your lawmakers. Please let them know that there's a monstrously huge difference between, and don't let them get away with just thinking that a humanitarian pause means they did the right thing, means that they were on the right side of history or something like that. It's very easy to say that you're outraged or shocked by something, because we all are. I think just deep down, none of us want to see a whole bunch of babies' skulls get crushed by buildings that collapse on them. So it's easy to say, I am horrified by the things I see. And then to add, and I call for a humanitarian pause to allow the some trucks to get in there, some supplies to get in there, and then the campaign can continue afterwards. No, this campaign cannot continue. This ethnic cleansing cannot continue. This has to be ceased immediately. That's why it's going to be, in my assessment, a domino effect. It's going to be one of those things where every single person who, and I'm not expecting right-wingers to ever join on this, and I'm guessing a lot of liberals are just going to be like, yes, but this is to defeat terrorism, you see? Yeah, but don't give in to all the malice that we had after 9/11, you know, just like that Joe Biden speech where he's like, don't give in to hatred. We should have learned so many things from 9/11. We didn't learn shit. Yeah, this is just like 9/11, isn't it? Yeah, it did. What happened after 9/11? Exactly. So here we are. A recent survey conducted by Data for Progress showed 2/3 of U.S. voters want the Biden administration to call for a ceasefire and de-escalation of violence in Gaza, leveraging its close diplomatic relations with Israel to prevent further violence and civilian deaths.
what has been striking, and I want to turn a little bit to what you've been writing about in your book, is we have now maybe close to a dozen, maybe a little more in members of Congress who have attempted to push for a ceasefire, haven't signed on to some of these censure votes that the House and Senate's taken. Bernie Sanders has been a little bit disappointing in terms of, to say the least, in terms of calling for a ceasefire. I think he called for a humanitarian pause. I'm not sure what that means. There obviously is something about the word has gone out. We don't want you saying the word ceasefire.
Right. He said the bombs from both sides should stop, but he won't say ceasefire. And you're like, well, what's the difference?
Well, why is it? I mean, it's obvious. The difference is obviously either the Biden administration has said this is an unhelpful term for us, or what? Because, one of the things that was sort of a coincidence, although I don't know that it, I think this is what APAC had in mind, is APAC has been basically off the past 2 cycles, at least, been on a very explicit sort of discipline campaign for potential dissenters in a situation like this in Congress. Tell us about it in the context of your book.
Yeah, it was really kind of surreal to go back over it, because I just did the recording for the audiobook over the last couple weeks, and I hadn't looked at the book for 6 months before that, and to see it in the context of this war was an odd experience. But you're right. It really goes back to February of 2019, and it goes back to the election of the squad in general, but in particular Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. And February 2019 is when Democratic Majority for Israel, DMFI, launches. And it was launched.
It is Tlaib, right? Why do you always hear like all these people saying Tlaib or Tlaib? Marjorie Taylor Greene. She can't even say the name of the person that she hates so much.
I report in the book with basically the support of APAC. Like, if you gave money to DMFI, then that would count kind of toward your dues, your credit to APAC. Because, depending on what kind of tier you are at APAC, you get different perks. At the APAC conference, you might get a private meeting with Schumer, or you get to meet Kevin McCarthy with a handful of other people who gave $1 million plus, and 5 million is a different.
That makes sense.
500. So if you gave money to DMFI, that would count towards APAC, because APAC was still doing grassroots. They hadn't gotten into the super PAC game yet, so they let DMFI do that in the 2020 cycle. But then in the 2022 cycle, APAC got into the game as well. And I write about how J Street, going into that cycle, raised about $2 to $3 million, and they thought DMFI would spend about 10 million, somewhere between 5 and 10. And that would be enough to make them competitive. You don't need to be 1-to-1, because the argument that DMFI and APAC.
Go ask Jason Jinkle or whatever his name is. I guess that is true. We do that to fucking Tinkle. We do call Tinkle. Tinkle. That is true. That is true. Yeah, that's a fair call out. I was gonna say, one of the things that actually kind of upset me is that how I'm seeing a lot of lefties, now starting to make fun of John Fetterman's speech patterns, and I was like, that was the shit that we were all calling out. All like if you want to criticize John Fetterman, fucking go after his horrifying support for this campaign right now. Attack that, right? But now people are making fun of his voice and making fun of his speech patterns because he's, as everyone knows, suffered a stroke. And I was like, don't fucking do that. Don't like throw all of your morals away just because now this person is seen as the enemy. It's like such a slippery slope.
APAC are making it so unpopular, they need to spend overwhelmingly. They actually came up with a rough calculation that APAC needs to outspend the progressive opponent.
Yeah, I guess speaking of which, Senator Fetterman on Israel's military campaign in Gaza. They are not targeting civilians. They never have, and they never will. Civilians were not the target. I mean, every single person who says this, by the way, all you're saying then is they're really fucking bad at their jobs. That's like, I've seen this defense being said so many times. Like, what Hillary Clinton was saying a similar thing, wasn't she? And it's like, well, then what you're saying is that they're just really, really shit at it. They're just so bad at doing that.
By about 10 to 1.
Wow.
And also, oh man, the fucking ghoulish shit that I'm seeing online. So many people in replies being like, you say that there's apparently like 1.1 million children there, and all I see is 3,000 kids apparently confirmed, if the numbers are true, dead. Seems to me that that's pretty precisional, you know? Wouldn't the numbers be much higher? And it's like, again, I want all of you to change your fucking avatars and your PFPs, change everything to what your body count is. I want to know. I want to know what is acceptable to you. I want to know at what point, how many dead children you will find abhorrent. At what point will it reach a level where you'll start to say something else? Because those numbers that we have, those are official death tolls that are being done from confirmed people with, you know, the ability to track both their either family history or stuff like that. There are thousands of people trapped under rubble. A lot of them are presumed dead. The death count is going to be much, 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 much higher once, you know, the official numbers come out. And we haven't even started to toll up all the people who are on the verge of dying from starvation and dehydration. That's like, again, I want to know. I want to know how much is acceptable to you. How much is it before you start saying, well, that's wrong. That's wrong, you know?
But if it's like 2 or 3 or 4 to 1, then it's a clean fight. It's a fair fight. And so then APAC comes in with more than $30 million.
This team was claiming there's no genocide in Gaza because of population increase. I mean, that's the same kind of apologia that people were doing for the Uyghur Muslims in China, or people have done that as well for Indigenous people in Canada, saying that, like, well, Indigenous people, you know, they're doing fine. There's very high birth rates. I mean, kind of seems like a failed genocide, right?
Just throwing over the apple cart, like completely changed the calculation.
Yeah, I'm not letting the red pillars take the term body count. It's so gross the way they use it. Like, bro, you know, when you're gonna, you know, decide whether or not this lady is worth your time, you know, she's high value, you got to know what her body count is. You got to know, you know, how many dicks have been up in there and shit like that. And you're just like, this is fucking disgusting. What is this weird fixation with wanting to hook up with people who have zero sexual experience? I don't understand it. Like, in every other aspect of life, if you do an activity, and if you've done that activity for a long time, and you do that activity a lot, you become progressively better at it, or more knowledgeable about the subject, right? So I don't understand why it's like, well, I mean, if she's had sex with someone else, then obviously that's bad. I was like, why? Is that, like, it's just because you're so fucking insecure that the very idea of someone of having sex with someone else is suddenly like, no, but my manliness, I can be the only penis.
Because now they could go in, and I think they spent $7 million against Donna Edwards in Prince George's County because she had cast a vote when she first got to office in 2009 that was not completely supportive of whatever Israel was doing in Gaza with that particular war, if you remember that one. And they've had it in for Donna Edwards ever since. So when she tried to come back, they just nuked her, spent, you know, millions against Summer Lee. Nita Alam, if you remember her, she was the first Muslim elected in North Carolina. Her friends were the ones who were killed in that very famous Chapel Hill hate crime, where like, you know, 3 or 4 Muslim men were killed. And she decided to get into politics, and she was elected a Durham County commissioner. She ran for Congress. They spent like $6 million to beat her, and they only beat her by a few points. So these are the kind of races that these candidates win. Like Donna Edwards wins without this intervention. And then all these other candidates around the country see this happening. And the consultants, and I talked to a bunch of consultants who had these meetings. Oh, DMFI, APAC are looking at this race. What do we do? And they would ask, John Fetterman, for instance, the campaign went to DMFI and said, what do we do? You know, how do we get you not to nuke us? We don't expect that you're going to support us. But Connor Lamb is out here pleading for super PAC support. How do we make sure that he doesn't get it? And they allowed DMFI, and Mark Mellman has said this on the record, to basically edit their Israel-Palestine platform. And they got it to a place where DMFI was like, okay, you're good. And they left Connor Lamb twisting in the wind. And Fetterman wins.
Hey, if you're watching this in a place where thumbs up is applicable, hit that thumbs up button. Apparently it helps boost the stream and the algorithm. It's good shit. Also, by the way, if you don't know about this, the Humanist Report Mike just released a video on AOC calling APAC out, saying that APAC has funded tons and tons of conservative election deniers, and that video. That video apparently has had a, what is it, adults only tab put on it. So it got flagged. So, you know, Mike made a post about it. Retweet that post if you want to make some noise about it. I think that's the first. I've been, you know, playing Mike videos on stream for a while. That's the first one in a long time that he's gotten that on.
This happened in lots of other races.
I lost both thumbs in the Twitter wars. Fair enough.
For this debate that we're having now, it was really interesting to see Greg Kassar and Max Frost both signed on to the CEASEFIRE NOW resolution, pushed by, introduced by Bush and Rashida Tlaib, and both of them were subject to intense pressure from DMFI and APAC. Both of them changed their kind of Israel-Palestine positions to not get nuked by APAC and DMFI, and then once in Congress, under with grassroots mobilization, their districts came back and supported the CEASEFIRE NOW resolution. So, kind of a loss for APAC and DMFI there. Not a complete loss, but a loss.
And what what has DMFI or APAC said about Kassar and Frost?
They haven't said anything publicly, and they both voted, for that resolution that justifiably condemned Hamas. Supported Israel, but said nothing about Palestinian civilians. That's the one that I think 9 Democrats voted against because it didn't mention Palestinian lives. So they're not all the way there, because they're cross-pressured intensely. But you wonder, like, are they going to whip up a primary challenge? And that's what. And
all y'all are being silly. It's like I fostered a community of comedians or something like that. You're posting clips about me and penises. Well, let's see. Only like, no, but my manliness. I can be the only penis. Like, no, but there it is.
Everybody's wondering that. Like, that's the. Now for Fetterman, the question is not, he's so popular, he's not going to get a primary.
There's no context. There's no context. All right, I got clipped without context.
Primary challenge, but as a swing state, are they going to put $20 million behind a Republican? What next time he runs? So, but it's in the back of the sheer amount of money is just in the back of everybody's mind, to the point where you don't have to spend it in most districts.
I'll explain nothing.
What do you think explains Bernie Sanders' hesitancy to say the word ceasefire on this?
So my sense from people in his orbit is that he is intoxicated, wouldn't be the right word. He has never before had the ear of the president of the United States throughout his career, including Obama and so on. Biden, he has Biden's ear. But he and Biden were like lockstep on a lot of domestic policy throughout 2021. He has further domestic policy goals that he wants to push, and I think he's just not willing to break from Biden and risk that. Now the problem there, I think, and he might not know this, everybody has Biden's ear. Like if you're in the House or Senate, even in the House, you want to call Biden will take your call. That's just kind of the kind of politician that he is. And separately, whatever domestic agenda Bernie has for the rest of 2023 and 2024 is not going anywhere. It's not like Speaker Mike Johnson is going to allow anything that Bernie likes to go through. But that's the best read that I've been able to get. But it's been, there's been a lot of disappointment from his supporters.
300 former staffers, was it?
Yeah. More than 300, probably closer to 400 by now, probably, because names keep getting added to it.
And theoretically, his calculation is my coming out and supporting a ceasefire is not going to do anything anyways.
Right.
And
that's how you could tell yourself that. Yeah. And it might be true.
It might be true, but it also might provide oxygen and sort of some type of cover.
I would say, again, it's one of those things where when you're one of the two, because there's already one person calling for a ceasefire, Dick Durbin's, like, it's going to be less politically effective than if it was all senators calling for one. But it's also something in which I think the more people who start doing it, the more politicians who start doing it, it's going to be who's going to be the last person left who didn't take a stand at this moment in history, right? And so, yeah, I think it is highly valuable.
For particularly people in the House, maybe other senators, unlikely other senators, but certainly people in the House to come out and stake out this position. If a senator is doing it, it becomes easier in some ways for a congressperson does, and he does.
Hey, I just started watching YouTube clips. You make good stuff. My name is pronounced Caher. Caher. It's Irish. Oh, cool. Nice.
Doesn't have to a House person. He doesn't have to
Dark
worry
Native.
about
Everyone go check out Dark Native's channel.
APAC coming after him.
Oh, Dark Native, while you're here, I want to bring attention to this. And I don't know if you've reached out to this organization. They're pretty awesome. But they highlight a whole bunch of Indigenous streamers on Twitch. And this is really sad, but since Twitch again ignored requests to feature streamers for Native American Heritage Month, we decided to put together one ourselves. And so here's a list of Indigenous streamers every single one of you watching right now should check out.
I'm Zoe Rain. I stream myself making polymer clay earrings for my business Clay and Rain, and I am from the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma.
I'm The Crow Show. I'm a Dead by Daylight content creator on Twitch and TikTok. I also host Red Rank Podcast.
I'm Witchy Twitchy. I'm a variety streamer and ASM artist, and I am Danae.
I'm Rivers Eagle, and this is my friend Bird. I stream a variety of games. I am Métis, and I grew up on the Sartlip Reservation on Vancouver Island.
I'm Alina Inverse. I am a chatty variety streamer from the Muskoka Nation.
My name's Dante Alexander, One True Native, and I'm a variety caster. I am Dakota Sioux.
I'm Raya Hontus. I am Navajo. I usually stream Valorant, Overwatch, and World of Warcraft.
My name is Derek from atop Derek Mountain. I stream role-playing, podcasts, and a variety of other games too. I am a Massachusetts Natick praying Indian.
I'm Simply
Wow, and radio voice extraordinaire.
Eureka, and I stream Dead by Daylight, Disney Dreamlight Valley. I play a variety of games. Sometimes I do just chatting.
My name is Hippo. I'm a Twitch partner that focuses on simulation and indie games. I am Chumash.
I'm Gino7. I stream RPG, story games, and some competitive FPS games. And I am Anishinaabe Ojibwe from Peguis First Nations.
My name is Asenanica Green River. I stream on Borderline.
Yeah, I'll give you the link.
I'm a variety streamer. I also love to do interviews, host podcasts. I am Namana, more commonly known as Comanche.
My name is Molly Umpkin. I'm a variety streamer here on Twitch.
It is unfortunate that the video audio is desynced. I know a lot of people don't like that. It's not in my doing.
And I'm also Mescalero Apache.
I am Bewitched Chula on Twitch. I stream a wide variety of different games. Right now it's mainly DBD. I also like to chat and chill with my community, and I am Danae and Pueblo.
I'm Digimanda. I'm a variety streamer. Right now I've been really into Zelda randomizers and Final Fantasy. I am Pescatu Makati and Santi Sue.
I'm Celestia, full-time content creator and Skyrim RPG streamer. I am Thinget.
We're gamers,
cosplayers, artists.
We are role players,
content creators.
We are voice actors.
We are Native American streamers on Twitch.
Native American streamers on Twitch.
We are Native American streamers on Twitch.
Here's the link if you want to share it. Oh man, since yesterday, it's already getting fucking almost 10,000 likes. Hell yeah. Here's a link. I'll put it in all the chats. Here you go. If you want to share it and go follow every single one of those creators. They have the links at the bottom as well to their respective profiles if they are on X. All right, so I'm sure you all saw this yesterday, this announcement.
Our nation was founded on the fundamental principle that all people should have the freedom to live, to worship, and to be without fear of violence or persecution. Every person has the right to live safe from violence, hate, and bigotry. And for those reasons and so many more, President Joe Biden and I have a duty, not only to keep the people of our nation safe, but to condemn unequivocally and forcefully all forms of hate. Since we took office, President Biden and I have fought to uphold that duty. Over the past decade, America has seen a rise in attacks on houses of worship. So in response, we expanded funding to protect houses of worship from violence. After a surge in hate during the pandemic, in particular anti-Asian hate, President Biden signed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act to improve the reporting of hate crimes and to ensure hate crimes are investigated quickly and thoroughly. Earlier this year, in response to an historic rise in anti-Semitic attacks, we also released the first national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. And to make clear, taking on hate is a national priority. President Biden and I held the first White House summit to address hate-fueled violence, and we brought together religious leaders, community leaders, and survivors to continue our work to keep all Americans safe. And today, we take another important step forward in our fight against hate. For years, Muslims in America and those perceived to be Muslim have endured a disproportionate number of hate-fueled attacks. As a result of the Hamas terrorist attack in Israel and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, we have seen an uptick in anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab, anti-Semitic, and Islamophobic incidents across America, including the brutal attack of a Palestinian-American woman who was Muslim and the killing of her 6-year-old son. A senseless act of violence that the Department of Justice is investigating as a hate crime. For so many people in our nation, the past few days and weeks have brought about...
Anyways, it keeps on going just like this. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not here to oppose trying to combat domestic Islamophobia or domestic anti-Semitism. Obviously, those things are horrifying and abhorrent. But, you know, in lieu of calling for ceasefire, in lieu of, you know, ending all military support to Israel, in lieu of trying to stop, you know, the indiscriminate bombings, the result has been a massive, massive drop in the support amongst Arab Americans, Muslim Americans for the Democrats. And in key swing states, aka Michigan, of which they have a very large population, I believe there's 255,000 registered voters, Joe Biden, again, won that state by 155,000 votes. And so if their support has now dropped to 17% in the last poll, probably lower now, can't say, but with certainty we know that their support has dropped to 17%. That is pretty much really bad. Really, 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 really fucking bad. For the Democrats. And yeah, so in my assessment, you know, to put out statements like this now, perhaps is them trying to put a band-aid on that. That's not an official, you know, reading. That's just me doing an opinion piece on this. But yeah. Do y'all know Red Scare? Red Scare podcast, very, very popular podcast, incredibly popular actually. It's massive. It's one of those huge ass fucking podcasts. A lot of people kind of got fooled into thinking that it was a leftist podcast because they're always like, lol, we're commies, lol, kek. And then they'll bring on people like Alex Jones and shit like that. It's basically people who want to LARP as being, you know, commie leftists while just essentially being groypers in all of their, you know, actions and policy and stuff like that. It's kind of like, hey, I'm a leftist, buy a Tesla. Kind of shit, you know? And I don't know if it's what the kids are listening to, but they do have a very massive following and lots of money and funding, all that kind of stuff. Anyways, right now they're in the middle of a civil war in their own Reddit, which I thought was kind of funny. Just gonna quickly read this. Just once, I would love for these girls to have an actual... Oh, and by the way, they've also made some pretty wild in interviews, like, you know, fucking transphobic statements and weird-ass shit. Like, they are just fucking weirdos. Just for once, I would love these girls to have an actual academic on their show. Dasha says she's a Zionist. Anna says both sides are really into communism? Do they know what these terms mean? Israel's a capitalist state. Gaza doesn't have enough agency to have any sort of economic system in the first place, but they're absolutely not communist. I feel like I'm listening to high schoolers share their views in a class presentation. I'm not even well-versed on Israel-Palestine crisis, but I feel I'm far more informed informed of both of them. And then it's this, I can see why. I really wish they'd never spoken on it. I've never thought of them, thought they both, but especially Dasha sounded so ignorant, out of touch, ill-informed, and callous. If they were going to cover it, they should have waited a couple months at least. This just depressed me, to be honest. They're so incurious, yet so cruel at the same time. That's always been their brand. It's just gotten sadder as it becomes clear that one, it's only a bit, and two, it's not even a bit. When does Dasha think the Palestinians showed up exactly? I knew it would be poorly researched, but I had to turn it off 20 minutes in. Was briefly hopeful when Anna was talking about Azerbaijan and shit that they might be able to extrapolate with their knowledge and connection to tense political situations in Eastern Europe, but my god, did I get exactly what I expected when I first saw the episode title. Listening to this makes me feel spiritually obese. The stupidity of these rods is no longer fun. This podcast is literally a work of genocide apologia. And then, yeah, lots of R slurs, lots of stuff. Because, yeah, you fostered a community of people who think that, like, oh, it's edgy to be ableist and hilarious. Yeah, lol. So, yeah, there is a bit of a meltdown going on right now in there. Because it's one of those things, if you're going to brand yourself and constantly talk about, like, I'm a communist. Like Amy Therese. Amy Therese is a great example. Awesome example. Amy Therese basically regurgitates a lot of racist-ass white nationalist talking points, but does so under the veneer of being a hardcore leftist. And then there are a lot of leftists sometimes who will see a post by Amy Therese, or same thing with Jackson Hinkle. Like a lot of the white supremacist, racist-ass fucking LARPers, what they do is they'll randomly have an issue that they find, and in the case of Jackson Hinkle, very, very profitable. He's already made posts where he's like, you know, holding up signs that say like Free Palestine, while at the same time saying, and now subscribe to my feed, please do so. Subscribe to my feed to help free Palestine and stuff like that. And then he gets fucking tons of retweets, tons of fucking, tons of people sharing his shit online. And a lot of them could be well-to-do who just don't know who the fuck Jackson Hinkle is. Or Richard Medhurst is another example of this. Richard Medhurst absolutely has been accused of grooming multiple 16-year-olds. One, I believe, was 15 years old. And it's not just like someone randomly posted about it on Twitter. There's entire receipts that are still up. I think there's still the Median original post that has them all, that shows text messages, that shows confirmed social media posts, that shows multiple things. And the accuser has been like, I was incredibly young at the time, and this is the kind of shit he was sending me. And it's all obviously fucking disgusting. And yes, it is an allegation. For sure, but it's an allegation he's never addressed, and just proceeds to block anyone who fucking posts about it on Twitter, which is, Among Us, sus as fuck kind of shit. So it's one of those things where, like, why doesn't anyone, or why are people retweeting that? Why are people sharing it? There's so many other places to get those videos. There's so many other places to find that shit,
Builds for a ceasefire after 27 days of Israel's bombardment of Gaza. We spend the rest of the hour.
I'm not going to play this entire interview, but I'm going to play the part that I think is going to resonate with every single one of you. If you haven't seen the viral clip going around right now, being shared by Nina Turner, Ryan Grimm, for example, it is very harrowing to hear someone's firsthand account, basically, of their experience, and how afterwards they were unable, like, it changed their life, basically, seeing what exactly is happening to human beings, fellow human beings in this part of the world.
With the acclaimed author and journalist Ta-Nehisi Coates. This summer, he spoke at a literary festival in the West Bank that connected the Palestinian struggle with decolonization struggles around the world. In Ramallah, he opened his remarks with a comparison between the struggle of African Americans and Palestinians. In recent weeks, Coates joined dozens of other writers and artists in signing an open letter from participants in the Palestine Festival of Literature that was published in the New York Review of Books, and called for, quote, the international community to commit to ending the catastrophe unfolding in Gaza and to finally pursuing a comprehensive and just political solution in Palestine.
Last night, Ta-Nehisi Coates participated in another event hosted by organizers of the Palestine Festival of Literature, or PALFest, in the James Chapel at Union Theological Seminary here in New York City. It was called But We Must Speak, on Palestine and the Mandates of Conscience. Ta-Nehisi is the recipient of a prestigious MacArthur Fellowship and the recipient of numerous prizes, including the National Book Award for his book Between the World and Me. We Were 8 Years in Power is another book, An American Tragedy, and his memoir, The Beautiful Struggle. His novel is titled The Water Dancer. In 2014, he wrote an award-winning cover story for The Atlantic magazine, headlined The Case for Reparations. Ta-Nehisi, welcome back to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us under extremely difficult circumstances. Last night, this remarkable event almost didn't happen. I mean, it was in the James Chapel of Union Theological Seminary, but venue after venue had said no to this gathering, and without almost any publicity. Well over 1,000 people turned out, but the place only held 300, so people went over across the street to another place of 300, overthrow, and then thousands watched on the live video stream. Can you talk about your experience being in the West Bank, going to the occupied territory?
I know a lot of you might be watching me, while doing other things. You could be cooking, you could be cleaning. You got me in the background, the show in the background. I understand that. And for the rest of my dribble, continue doing whatever you're doing. Okay, just go forth and do other activities. Do whatever you want to do. Don't pay attention to me. I'm a fucking jabroni on the internet. That's completely fine and valid. Please, right now, just take a couple minutes to listen to this firsthand account and get ready to share it with family member and friends, centrists who are kind of in the it's complicated field, because again, it is absolutely jaw-dropping.
And how it changed you.
Oh, wow. I spent 10 days in Palestine, in the occupied territories, and in Israel proper. I've had the great luxury over the past 10 years of seeing a few countries. I have not spent more time or seen more of another country or another territory than I did this summer. I think what shocked me the most was in any sort of opinion piece or reported piece or whatever you want to call it that I've read about Israel and about the conflict with the Palestinians, there's a word that comes up all the time, and it is complexity. That and its closely related adjective, complicated. And so while I had my skepticisms and I had my suspicions of the Israeli government, of the occupation, what I expected was that I would find a situation in which it was hard to discern right from wrong. It was hard to understand the morality at play. It was hard to understand the conflict. And perhaps the most shocking thing was I immediately understood what was going on over there. Probably the best example I can think of is the second day when we went to Hebron, and the reality of the occupation became clear. We were driving out of East Jerusalem. I was with the Palestinian, with PalFest, and we were driving out of East Jerusalem into the West Bank, and you could see the settlements, and they would point out the settlements, and it suddenly dawned on me that I was in a region of the world where some people could vote and some people could not, and that was obviously very, very familiar to me. I got to Hebron, and we got out as a group of writers, and we were given a tour by a Palestinian guide, and we got to a certain street, and he said to us, "I can't walk down this street. If you want to continue, you have to continue without me." And that was shocking to me. And we walked down the street, and we came back, and there was a market area. Hebron is very, very poor. It wasn't always very poor, but it is very, very poor. Its market area has been shut down. But there are a few vendors there that I wanted to support. And I was walking to try to get to the vendor, and I was stopped at a checkpoint. Checkpoints all through the city. Checkpoints obviously all through the West Bank. Your mobility is completely inhibited, and the mobility of the Palestinians is totally inhibited. And I was walking to the checkpoint, and an Israeli guard stepped out, probably about the age of my son. And he said to me, "What's your religion, bro?" And I said, "Well, I don't, I'm not really religious." And he said, "Come on, stop messing around. What is your religion?" I said, I'm not playing. I'm not really religious. And it became clear to me that unless I professed my religion and the right religion, I wasn't going to be allowed to walk forward. So he said, well, okay, so what was your parents' religion? I said, well, they weren't that religious either. He says, what were your grandparents' religion? And I said, my grandmother was a Christian. And then he allowed me to pass. And it became very, very clear to me what was going on there. And I have to say, it was quite familiar. Again, I was in a territory where your mobility is inhibited, where your voting rights are inhibited, where your right to the water is inhibited, where your right to housing is inhibited, and it's all inhibited based on ethnicity. And that sounded extremely, extremely familiar to me. And so the most shocking thing about my time over there was how uncomplicated it actually is. Now, I'm not saying the details of it are not complicated. History is always complicated. Present events are always complicated. But the way this is reported in the Western media is as though one needs a PhD in Middle Eastern studies to understand the basic morality of holding a people in a situation in which they don't have basic rights, including the right that we treasure most, the franchise, the right to vote, and then declaring that state a democracy. It's actually not that hard to understand. It's actually quite familiar to those of us with a familiarity to African-American history.
Well, Ta-Nehisi Coates last night.
Like, again, it's just like, it's rare you get basically someone explaining firsthand what it is like on the ground for every single person living there, and you don't ever hear about it in Western media. No Western media talks about this. They may say like, well, Amnesty International has apparently just taken a very controversial stance in declaring that there's a system of apartheid, under the rules of international law taking place currently towards people who are living in the West Bank and Gaza, yes, that's going to be coming up. But before that, we got a silly squirrel that has some huge nuts. Stay tuned, everybody. You're gonna love this story. That's basically as far as you'll get in terms of Western media on what life could be like. This is not even going towards the horrific and horrifying stories. If you've been doom scrolling like I am, you're seeing people who are literally shot point blank in the face and stuff like that for trespassing in areas they're not allowed to go by. One guy was throwing a rock and was shot dead, stuff like that. That's kind of like the more horrifying, extreme, grim reality for people who live in that region. But yeah, it's treating another group, another ethnicity, another collection of people completely differently. And the fact that you're questioned as to what your religious beliefs are, and if they're the wrong religious beliefs, then you can't proceed into an area. That's so grim. That's just it's so fundamentally wrong. The rest of this interview is also excellent. I watched it this morning. If you want to share it, there's a lot of links online, but here's the link to the full thing. I can't doom scroll all day, I know. The worst thing is doom scrolling at night, especially when you're like, I should be going to bed right now. I just need to know if there's any updates. Yeah, it's worse. Oh God, it's so much worse. Well, by morning, maybe. Oh God, it's much worse. Holy fuck, it's worse. It's absolutely worse. Yeah. YouTube reversed the age restriction. Hell yes. Hell yes. We did it, everyone. Well, I mean, what better time than now to watch that video? Hold on. Oh, I do want to play one quick thing. I love this. I absolutely fucking love this statement.
Can I interview you? I'm Palestinian, asking people why they support Palestine.
Because I'm a human being. Do you think I'm going to sit back, watch my TV and watch a genocide? No chance.
Marshall Ghetto, thank you very much for the tier 1. Good timing, Lance. Great time.
This isn't about religion, so it's not about being Muslim, being Jewish, whatever. I'm a Christian, okay? But I'm a human being. That's all that matters to me. I know people keep saying open air prison, but I watched something today that was about the language that you use, right? Yeah. Actually, they're hostages. So everyone's talking about hostages.
Yeah.
Come on.
2 million people, hostages.
It doesn't make sense. Yeah. It doesn't make sense. And this will never, ever, ever end until they're free. Yeah. It's as simple as that.
I could not agree more. Hey, don't worry, we're not doing ghouls just yet, but I want to watch that Humanist report. Oh, I thought I had it here. All right, let's find it.
Is there a threshold for you, and do you think there should be one for the United States government, at which the U.S. would say, let's hold off for a second in terms of civilian casualties? Is there a point at which you would start to...
Hey, I mean, at least he's honest, unlike a lot of other people, especially a lot of libs who are basically just like, oh, well, it's complicated. Oh, well, Israel's right to defend itself. You know, it's certainly something in which we need to look towards having a more humane, you know, obeying the international rules of order in terms of warfare. That's pretty much it. But I mean, Lindsey Graham is just like, oh no, yeah, bomb them all, every single child, every single one of them, every child there is Hamas.
You just heard Republican Senator Lindsey Graham answer the question that many of us have asked. How many innocent civilians have to die until you call for a ceasefire? And the answer is as many as it takes. 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, 100,000. The number doesn't matter. We're unequivocally standing with Israel no matter what. They can bomb refugee camps, administer collective punishment, use white phosphorus. It doesn't matter how many innocents die, we are going to stand with Israel, even if that makes us complicit. Now, that answer is not surprising coming from a bloodthirsty warmonger like Lindsey Graham, but many liberals might be surprised to learn that this is the same stance as the Biden administration. They've explicitly stated that they're not drawing red lines for Israel, and that's not surprising considering that the White House press secretary dismissed calls for a ceasefire as repugnant and compared anti-Israel protesters, who, by the way, are calling for a ceasefire, to the Nazis who marched in Charlottesville in 2017. And the reason why they're saying this, the reason why it's permissible to just dismiss the suffering and slaughter of innocent Palestinians is because our politicians and media have so thoroughly dehumanized Palestinians that the idea of an innocent Palestinian itself is literally being challenged. And that's not hyperbole.
I would encourage the other side to not so lightly throw around the idea of innocent Palestinian civilians, as is frequently said. I don't think we would so lightly throw around the term innocent Nazi civilians during World War II.
I mean, 50% of the people in Gaza are children, but we...
The Nazi children. Come on. The Hitler youth, Hitler Hamas. Oh no, Hamas youth. There you go. Yeah, we got it.
have to be really careful with our language here so as to not humanize the Palestinians, because we don't want to give Americans the impression that Palestinians are innocent in the middle of Israel's genocide. Otherwise, the public might start to question whether or not it's ethical for us to support them being wiped off the map or being leveled like a parking lot, as one politician put it.
I don't even want to call it the Palestinian flag because they're not a state. They're a territory that's about to probably get eviscerated. And
what song is randomly playing in y'all's heads today? Since yesterday, I haven't been able to get Bloodhound Gang out of my brain. It sucks. It's all from that Jordan Peterson meme. If you didn't see, Jordan Peterson released this like fucking weird ass drinking song music video, and then there was a parody by JT Thought, and then that parody is you know, you and me, baby. I shouldn't do it. I'm gonna curse all of you. And yeah, that's like the curse. At night I was just like, you know, flossing my teeth, and my partner was walking by, and I was like. She's like, oh, why are you humming the Bloodhound Gang? And I was like, oh, fuck. All right, so this one's gonna be long to explain. Jordan Peterson, yes, I know who that is. Yeah, so Jordan Peterson made a music video, and it's really weird. It's about how Foucault was basically a pedophile, and that Foucault is the one who taught us to think that racism was bad, and because of that, now the whole world is super like SJW woke, and because of that and third wave feminism, we all have to drink ourselves to death, or at least they want their enemies to drink themselves to death, you know, including people like Kimberly Crenshaw and some stuff like that. And so then she's like, okay, and then so So this leftist who makes really good memes on the internet took that and then took out the video footage and replaced it with animals fucking, and then took the one with the animals fucking and added that song by the Bloodhound Gang to I wish I hadn't asked, honestly. Like at this point, you know. Fair enough.
Go away here shortly, as we're going to turn that into a parking lot.
Despicable, but completely on brand for Republicans. I mean, they don't care about Americans being slaughtered endlessly in countless mass shootings, so of course they're not going to care about innocent civilians in Gaza being massacred as well. But on the subject of gun violence, many Democratic politicians have rightfully posed the question to Republicans that is now being asked to them. How many more innocent people have to die until you take action? In the case of gun violence, how many more innocent Americans have to be murdered until Republicans do something? Ban assault weapons, pass a national background check law. And we've never gotten a direct answer to that question, but years of inaction has essentially told us everything that we need to know. And when Democratic politicians hammer Republicans for their complicity in gun violence, they're quick to call out the role played by the NRA. And they're correct to point that out. The NRA spends...
Now Lance is done. Zombie by the Cranberries. Fucking The Office ruined that song for me. I forget the name. Ed Helms? Is that his name? The guy who like sings it all the time and then to try and get it in people's heads, you know? And then I was like, oh God, I like the Cranberries. They were pleasant.
Millions of dollars every single election cycle, almost exclusively on Republicans to buy their complicity. And it works. As Democratic Congressman Richie Torres puts it, no amount of mass murder against children is enough for the Republican.
Hey, I love how everyone is constantly distracted by other things. It's good, you know. I think it's probably healthy because if you're just 24/7 getting this like, you know, drip feed right now of all this kind of news and stuff, where you're just like, the world's fucked. World's real fucked. A lot of fuckery. You know what? Again, one of the only pieces of good news is how many people are starting to just suddenly wake up. I think there was a mass awakening, a great wokening, if you will, in the second round of Black Lives Matter protests, where all of a sudden you saw, you know, a lot of white Americans who may not have thought about the very concept of, you know, police violence towards Black Americans, and then how there's, you know, statistically a 3 times higher chance of being shot and killed by the police if you're Black than if you're white. That kind of stuff really pushed a lot of that into the consciousness. And I saw a lot of, like, you know, liberals and even my liberal friends who suddenly were like, you know, at a certain point I have to take a stand and like, this is not right. And I was like, oh wow, wait till I tell you about the treatment of Indigenous people in Canada. Oh, we got a lot to discuss. Yeah, if you want to talk about over-representation in prison systems, we got our own. But it's good. It's a good thing. Absolutely good. You know, there's a lot of people, I think, in their heart of hearts, they're well-to-do and they believe, you know, they want to do the right thing, and a lot of the time their worldview is shaped by a lot of our popular culture, and a lot of our popular culture is reinforcing all of this kind of shit, right? Reinforcing racist stereotypes, reinforcing misogynistic stereotypes, shit like that, and you know, a lot of them are programmed by that, and a lot of them usually get a lot of their mainstream media from this drip feed that, even if it's online, you're getting, you know, your Instagram posts by the influencers you like, and you're getting your TikToks by the influencers you like, and all of them are kind of doing every now and then one of them is like, je suis Paris. And then you're like, whoa, okay, yeah, I too am Paris. I agree, gonna change my profile picture. And then activism is usually like, you know, a couple photos or something like that. But there are moments in history where people, like, propaganda stops working. There's a breaking point. There's only so much you can be told the same thing over and over and over. It happened to Wolf Blitzer. Wolf fucking Blitzer. We saw it happen in real time to Wolf fucking Blitzer, you know? Wolf Blitzer just like standing there is like, but you can't confirm that it was a Hamas stronghold or that you killed a Hamas. Oh, yes, no, we believe that we took out a Hamas general. Okay. You knew that there was lots of civilians in that refugee camp and you dropped the bomb anyway, though, and thereby killing lots of civilians in the process. I gotta go. We're getting something. I can't hear you very well.
Party to let go of the iron grip the NRA has on them. Sickening. And he even courageously called for the abolition of the NRA entirely. And what he's saying here...
Oh, thanks, my dogs are goth. I love that interview. Yeah, go if you haven't watched it. I was the last member of the leftist mafia that the letter hack hadn't interviewed. You know, I did the interview, and it's awesome. He's actually a really good interviewer, by the way. In that, like, there's some people who interview you, because I've done a lot of interviews where they just want to ask you a set of like I don't know, 15 pre-planned questions. And obviously he had planned questions as well, but really good interviewers, they flow with what you're talking about, and then they have a conversation with you and meet you halfway, and then they can extrapolate certain ideas and stuff out of you that you might not even be willing to talk about in the first place. He does that. And it's like, I don't think he's known for that. He's probably just known as this incredible cartoonist who's always drawing all of the lefties. But like, yeah, he's a really, really good interviewer.
Makes sense, because when human life is at stake, how can you justify taking money from an organization that is effectively paying you to be complicit in the deaths of innocent people?
What did XQC do this time? Oh, I'm going to show you. XQC had himself a time, all right. He basically was called out for something and then tried to clap back by doing the exact thing he was being called out for, and then was just getting ratioed by all these other accounts for it, and then was trying to, like, you know, salvage it by posting how expensive his watches are. And by the way, that watch is ugly as fuck. If someone was wearing a watch, and I'm assuming it's like, what, $50,000, $100,000 for this watch that's like just, you know, covered in diamonds and shit, it looks disgusting. Who the fuck wears that shit? It's so fucking ugly. And like, to be like, yo, bro, I got this watch. It's the same value as a condo. And it's like, yeah, that shit's hideous. Go buy a condo. The fuck is wrong with you? Why would you spend so much money on something so gross?
It's basically blood money. But the same can be said about him as well. Like the NRA, APAC is a far-right neoconservative interest group that spends millions and millions of dollars every single election cycle lobbying politicians to buy their complicity in Israel's oppression of the Palestinian people in West Bank and Gaza. But unlike the NRA, APAC actually gives to both Republicans and Democrats, though both organizations spend close to the same amount lobbying each year, give or take. So if you're wondering why liberal Democrats unequivocally support Israel's right-wing government and refuse to criticize Netanyahu's war crimes, even though he is basically their version of Donald Trump, this is why. It's the same reason why the Republicans won't do anything about gun violence. In the same way that the NRA buys compliance, APAC does the same when it comes to Israel policy. Take Richie Torres, for example, again. His biggest campaign contributor in the last election cycle was APAC, and that money was well spent because...
Why are they flexing blood diamonds? No shit. No shit. Look at all the immense human suffering that came from me to be able to hold up this hideous ass piece of jewelry. And you know what sucks? Is that, you know, we got these gender stereotypes. There's not a lot of accessories for men without being called the worst things in the world. Gay, feminine. So, you know, there's only a set amount of things that dudes can really accessorize. You get belts. You get ties sometimes, not bow ties. Those are a little bit too gay, but you get that, and watches. That's the other one, right? I guess you could wear like a cross around you as long as you're wearing like a wife beater and show that you've got huge muscles, because that way it's like, yo, bro, I pump, right? But so the watch being one of the things that men can accessorize and have fun accessorizing it and that kind of stuff, and why would you pick the most hideous fucking thing in the world? And again, he's the one. XQC was also fucking moaning about oh yeah, it's like I'm being asked to like support charities and stuff like that. I don't know anything about this conflict. I don't know anything about the charities. What am I going to do about that? And then that same day he was saying that shit, I saw a headline that was like, XQC loses fucking hundreds of thousands of dollars on Jake Paul fight or some shit like that. He really upset that someone like, you know, misled him into gambling. He's like, the guy's a fucking gambler. He's a gambler. He is gambler.
Richie Torres has not only shot down the notion of a ceasefire, but he's also criticized people calling for one, and also denies the notion altogether that Israel...
Watches are so ugly. There's nice watches, you know, and there's nice watches that you can wear that don't need fucking, you know, the minerals excavated in impoverished countries or nations.
Israel is doing a genocide in Gaza. Now, keep in mind that Israeli Holocaust scholar Raz Siegel says that Israel's assault on Gaza is a textbook case of genocide, and on top of that, the UN's Director of Human Rights resigned over the West's support for what he calls genocide, his words, not mine. But if you ask Richie Torres whether or not it's a genocide, well, here's what he'll say.
The notion that Israel is committing ethnic cleansing and genocide is absurd. And keep in mind that the critics of Israel have been accusing Israel of committing genocide long before the conflict. You know, Israel is in an enormously complicated situation. If you believe, as I do, that Israel has the right to defend itself, in order to defend itself, it has to drive Hamas out of power. If Israel were to keep Hamas in power, it would run the risk of an even deadlier terrorist attack against its own people in the future. And Israel cannot afford a Hamas that's empowered to perpetrate deadly terrorist attack against its own people. The highest responsibility of any government, whether it's the United States or Israel, is to protect its people.
With a straight face, he said the notion that Israel is committing a genocide is absurd. Now, for one, I'm more inclined to agree with the Israeli Holocaust scholar and an expert on human rights at the UN. I'm inclined to think that they know a lot more about this than Richie Torres, but I mean, his point is that Israel has the right to defend itself no matter the cost. So this begs the question, again, how many innocent Palestinians have to die in the name of Israel defending itself before Richie Torres says enough is enough? 10,000, 20,000? I mean, 3,195 children plus have already been killed in 3 weeks in the name of self-defense. So the question is, how much is enough for Richie Torres? And as someone who knows the power of lobbying, he knows the answer. So let's put his tweet back up, and you'll notice that I took the liberty to change a couple of words. Quote, no amount of mass murder against children is enough for the Democratic Party to let go of the iron grip APAC has on them. Sickening. So when he calls out the NRA for their blood money, that's the pot calling the kettle black. And I may have changed some words there in that tweet, but that is effectively the position that Richie Torres, as well as the Biden administration, is taking, which isn't a surprise considering all of the money that Biden took as well from the Israel lobby during his tenure as a U.S. senator. But if you point this out, you're anti-Semitic, according to Richie Torres, because he responded to claims that he's bought off by lobbyists saying there's a false narrative that I am pro-Israel because of, quote, the Jewish lobby or, quote, Jewish money or whatever anti-Semitic tropes critics wish to invoke. Left unmentioned is the fact that I have been pro-Israel for nearly a decade, long before I ever thought of running for Congress. Now, to his latter point, I mean, I guess that's fair. Maybe he was unapologetically pro-Israel before running for Congress, but the same can also be said about Republicans that Richie Torres criticizes. Maybe Jim Jordan, the single biggest individual recipient of NRA money, was also pro-gun before he got into Congress, and he was always really enthusiastic about no gun safety laws in America. I mean, if it's true for Richie Torres, the same can be said for pro-gun Republicans, right? Now, his main point there is that pointing out this corruption is apparently anti-Semitic. Now, if you'll notice, he did a little bit of a switcheroo there, and he said the Jewish lobby and Jewish money, which is a straw man because critics who refer to APAC are referring to the Israel lobby. Now, there is a difference, and it's important that we don't muddy the waters between these differences and obfuscate. So the difference is that the Israel lobby does not spend money at the behest of the Jewish people. This is not a Jewish human rights organization or a Jewish advocacy organization. They spend money at the behest of Israel's right-wing government. And this isn't unique to Israel. If you look at the total foreign lobbying done since 2016, Israel is actually 9th out of 10. Number 1 is China. Is it xenophobic to point that out? No, because everyone knows that China is lobbying when it comes to business and trade. Saudi Arabia spends more than Israel. So when we point out that it's wrong to sell them weapons because we know that they're going to use them on innocent Yemenis, is it Islamophobic to point that out? No.
I really like the look of manufactured gems. They're so gorgeous. Yeah, if you didn't know, by the way, you can get diamonds that are, synthetically created using compression methods. If you want to avoid, the entire extraction industry that gets them.
Because Saudi Arabia represents the Saudi Arabian...
Also, just by the way, the idea of diamonds is incredibly silly. If you look at the history of it and why it's directly associated with love and stuff like that, a lot of that had to do with De Beers and definitely, a very well-financed campaign to be able to promote the idea and associate directly with marriage and thereby, making the value and the desire for diamonds to increase exponentially.
Government when they lobby, not Muslim people. Similarly, when the Israel lobby spends money, they are not advocating for Jewish people. They are promoting the neoconservative positions that the Israeli government holds when it comes to Iran. And they're trying to buy silence when it comes to the Israeli government's treatment of Palestinians. But all of a sudden, according to Richie Torres, it's anti-Semitic. No, that is such a despicable thing to say, because anti-Semitism is very real and it is rising around the globe. Now, there are conspiracy theories about Jews controlling the government and the media, and they are deeply harmful and anti-Semitic, and we must defeat them. But what these defenders of Israel are doing is they're trying to muddy the waters and pretend as if criticism of Israel is tantamount to those right-wing conspiracy theories about Jewish people. When that doesn't even make sense because we don't have that same standard for any other government. Because
Adam Conover, yeah, Adam Conover's, that's probably the best if you don't have a lot of time in your day and you don't have to watch a long documentary on it. Just watch Adam Conover Ruins Everything's episode on diamonds.
it's illogical. Of course, you can critique a government without critiquing the people. People are people and governments are governments. But what Richie Torres is paid to do is draw this equivalent specifically to silence critics of Israel. But in doing so, he is effectively smearing Jewish people, a community that he is not a part of. Because Jewish people are not responsible for the actions of Israel's fascist government. And to say that a criticism of Israel is tantamount to a criticism of Jewish people, is that not an incitement of hatred? Because when we see that Israel is doing war crimes, you're basically saying, no, Jewish people are responsible for that too. That's not okay. Countless Jewish peace activists have led protests against Israel.
Define Semite. Isn't Semite, by definition, people who speak a Semitic language, and that's typically Jews and Arabs, if I'm not mistaken?
Israel's genocide in Gaza. So when you conflate Israel with all Jewish people, you are attaching culpability to them in the same way that Israel's government is attaching culpability to all Palestinians by drawing a false equivalence between them and Hamas. You're no better than the politicians who are saying there are no innocent Palestinians. Again, people are people and governments are governments. Muddying the waters in that regard is downright dangerous.
Hebrew and Arabic descended from Shem, same God.
It helps to proliferate hate against these communities that are seeing an increase of hate because of what's happening. And if you can point out the NRA's effect on politicians, you obviously can do the same.
Damn you, Lance, I have Bloodhound King in my head. Enjoy that one. That one's not going away. It's, yeah, that stayed with me for a day and a half. I'm actually, I've got cranberries in my head now, though, so thank you to whoever did that. Zombie.
When it comes to Israel. And spoiler alert, we live in a late-stage capitalist hellscape. Most policy positions of politicians can be explained by simply looking up their donors. Want to know which politicians support Medicare for all?
By the way, I don't know if this is a documented ADHD thing, but I've noticed I have a really bad problem with being able to get rid of that phenomenon. And when I used to like produce music, I like if you were working on a key chord or something and it went like do, 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 and you were trying to find out the best like sequence in the next like all night I would dream of that, hearing those same notes just like do, 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 and then I would wake up and like the first thing is like do, 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 and I was like, oh my god, I can't get it out of my head.
Ones that haven't taken money from the health insurance industry. Want to know which ones are perfectly fine with 68,000 Americans dying every single year due to a lack of health insurance? Well, the ones who took donations from the health industry. Want to know which politicians don't support an increase in the minimum wage? Just look up the donations that they've taken from large multinational corporations who disproportionately employ minimum wage workers, so on, so forth. This is the way that our government functions. And calling that out is important. It's honest. It's not anti-Semitic. But those who say that it is anti-Semitic are playing a very dangerous game here, and they're inciting hatred against people who have nothing to do with the actions of the Israeli government. But thankfully, lawmakers are starting to call this out, and it's not just progressives who are doing that. For example, APAC called out lawmakers who voted against the House resolution standing with Israel, saying instead of standing with Israel, Republican Thomas Massie is standing with the squad. Now, AOC actually responded to that, pointing out APAC endorsed scores of January 6th insurrectionists. They are no friend to American democracy. They are one of the more racist and bigoted PACs in Congress as well, who disproportionately target members of color. They are an extremist organization that destabilizes U.S. democracy. Now, Cori Bush chimed in saying APAC's dark money grift and anti-democracy propping up of insurrectionists are attempts to undermine the will of the people. They spread lies, distort truth, and spend millions of dollars targeting black and brown elected officials working to end hate and injustice. Now, Ilhan Omar also jumped in, adding, APAC literally ran ads with my face next to Hamas rockets, resulting in a string of threats against my life. When Democratic leadership called them out, they refused.
I would love to have Consciously on, honestly. I follow him and retweet him, but I don't know if he follows me. But actually, I could ask Olayemi about that. I think Olayemi has his contact info.
To apologize and kept the ads up. What they are doing is insulting and Islamophobic. You can
Today, the long stream, 2 streams. We got the first one on right now, and then we're going to be taking a little break, and then we're going to be doing a very special episode of the Leftist Mafia, where we are going to be doing a canvassing drive to try and get everyone to call and contact all of their lawmakers to demand an immediate ceasefire and to end all military aid to Israel.
Not claim to be progressive while launching a super PAC that exclusively targets progressives and supports Republicans in the general. Now, to my surprise, a Democrat who wasn't even called out by APAC jumped in, Mark Pocan, who echoed what AOC said, saying, "Gotta admit, this sums up how many feel about what APAC really is about. Insurrectionists, WTF, no friend of democracy." Now, APAC responded to him by calling him a hypocrite and accusing him of singling them out, but he hit back saying, "What APAC doesn't tell you is they raise money from big Republican donors and spend it in Democratic primaries against Democrats. It's a cynical, undemocratic strategy, and since they clearly don't care about
Mike almost uwu Democrats said, Democrats.
dead kids, it's all about backing a conservative Netanyahu position." Now, AOC buttressed Pocan's point, saying it's past time for us to recognize how toxic of a presence APAC has been in our political system.
I don't think my Canadian American senator will listen to me. You got Ted Cruz. If that's the case, you can also contact the office of his opponent. Is it still going to be Beto? Either way, whoever would be his most viable opponent, and also campaign there, and also use that as a issue. Be like, obviously Ted Cruz has not demanded a ceasefire, and he seems to be, completely comfortable with the amount of children that have been already killed during this bombing campaign in 2023. This is an opportunity to be on the right side of history, outflank him, all that kind of stuff.
They actively boost candidates who tried to overthrow the U.S. election and run smear campaigns on members of Congress who stand up for human rights.
Oh, you can help. The UK, every single European nation, absolutely. Every single place in the world. I mean, there's certain countries that have already, cut off diplomatic ties or stated that they're no longer going to be supporting Israel as long as this, continued ethnic cleansing is taking place. But yeah, the UK, there are many resources on how to contact your politicians, to speak to your politicians. There's already been one politician in the UK who called for ceasefire, and the conservatives were like, nah, you're out.
Enough. Now, on top of that, Justice Democrats chimed in, pointing out APAC endorsed 109 Republican members of Congress that voted to overturn Joe Biden's election, including the current Speaker, Mike Johnson. But it gets even better, because Thomas Massie, the original target of APAC's tweet, a Republican, by the way, he also jumped in, saying, "APAC always gets mad when I put America first. I won't be voting for their $14 billion shakedown of American taxpayers either. Let them know what you think by replying to their post. They are intentionally misrepresenting my intent and the resolution I voted against." Now, in a follow-up tweet, he explained his reasoning for opposing that resolution. Among them, he thought that it was too hawkish, and he didn't want to commit to foreign aid that he doesn't support. But most importantly, quote, "It contains an open-ended promise of military support that is so broad that it could be interpreted to commit U.S. soldiers to the conflict. U.S. troops should not be engaged in this conflict, and it tends to broaden the conflict to other countries when it would be better to keep the war contained geographically." So APAC thought that they could go after a bunch of lawmakers who oppose them, and these lawmakers would be too afraid to speak out. But they're not. They're fighting back finally.
Every time I write to a senator in my Congress, I got told there's nothing they can do, ask someone else. That's a lot easier to discount when it's one person or two people or 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people saying that. And then it's a lot harder when it's 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, a million.
APAC is smearing these lawmakers, pretending like they refuse to stand with Israel or condemn Hamas, when in actuality, the resolution that they opposed is much more complex than that. Progressives who opposed it did so because there was no concern for Palestine.
The petition that's ceasefiretoday.com is already at 256,363 signatures. These are rookie numbers. Let's get those numbers up. All right, let's get those numbers up.
So for Thomas Massie and progressives to take the gloves off and go after APAC like this in a direct public way, That is huge. It almost feels like a paradigm shift because this is something that politicians avoid because it could be the end of their careers. And what AOC and all of these politicians are doing here is important because it forces Democrats to take APAC money to explain why they're aligned with a far-right organization that contributes to Republicans. And that framing matters because Democratic Party voters might not know that APAC is bad because it's lobbying specifically at the behest of Israel's ultra-nationalist Trumpian government. But if they end up finding out that Democrats are taking money from an organization that also supports insurrectionist Republicans, I mean, that could change their perception of this organization as well as Democrats that take money from this organization. Now, before you send flowers to Thomas Massie and Mark Pocan, you should probably know that Pocan also does not support a ceasefire despite his denunciation of APAC. And Thomas Massie is basically the inverse of Richie Torres when it comes to the NRA, albeit to a lesser extent. He only admits to taking $2,000 from the NRA, but it's a little bit disingenuous to say that because, as Becky Whitehill points out, Citizens United has made
I think you forgot to put stuff on top of the stock footage here, Mike. That or cut back to your face.
made it so organizations can give indirectly to politicians through super PACs. So if you look up his donations, you'll see that he's taken thousands more from non-NRA gun interest groups throughout his career. And like the gun lobby, the Israel lobby is comprised of more than just APAC, and campaign contributions alone don't tell us everything. Thomas Massie might not be the most bought-off Republican when it comes to the gun lobby, but he knows that if he suddenly endorsed gun safety legislation, well, the gun lobby could come after him by funding his opponent in the next primary. And knowing this is a possibility has a profound impact on politicians. Take John Fetterman, for example. As The Intercept reports, quote, during his primary race against Representative Connor Lamb, as The Intercept previously reported, Fetterman allowed the Democratic Majority for Israel, another pro-Israel interest group, to guide his platform on Israel and Palestine. DMFI had spent the campaign season dropping millions of dollars in opposition to progressive Democrats critical of U.S. support for Israel, and Fetterman succeeded in avoiding their ire. And in order to avoid DMFI and APAC bankrolling his opponent during that primary, he had to make it crystal clear that he would support U.S. aid to Israel without any additional conditions. Now, what happens if you don't toe the line of the Israel lobby or you refuse to play ball with them? Well, they could crush you. As Common Dreams explains, APAC in recent U.S. elections has spent millions of dollars to defeat progressive candidates such as Representative Summer Lee and former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner, both supporters of Palestinian human rights as well as pro-democracy reforms in the U.S. with mixed success. And the success was mixed there because Summer Lee ended up winning despite all the money from the Israel lobby spent against her. But Nina Turner, however, ended up losing. Now, at one point, there was a poll that showed that Nina Turner had a 35-point lead over her opponent. And her opponent, Shontel Brown, knew that if she was going to win, she needed more money fast. So what did she do? Well, as The Intercept explains, she low-key pleaded with super PACs to throw her a life vest. In particular, she conspicuously shared quotes on her website about how she was very pro-Israel, and this was a shameless attempt to solicit contributions from the Israel lobby, but guess what? It worked. She got the money, and she won. Now, the same thing could happen to Cori Bush. In fact, it's happening right now before our very eyes, because as the Washington Post explains, St. Louis County Prosecutor Wesley Bell announced this week he was dropping his months-long bid to unseat one of the country's most outspoken Republican senators, Josh Hawley, to launch a primary campaign to oust fellow Democrat Representative Cori Bush. When asked to explain his switch, Bell pointed to Bush's criticism of Israel. Now, as Twitter user Sean points out here, this line of attack against Bush is his opening pitch to APAC and DMFI. And he's correct about that. I mean, why try to defeat an insurrectionist Republican when it's easier to raise thousands of dollars automatically by pledging your undying loyalty to Israel? See, him declaring loyalty to Israel isn't going to matter in the Senate race against Josh Hawley because Josh Hawley also pledged his undying loyalty to Israel. But where it could really make a difference is against a progressive deemed the enemy of APAC, Cori Bush. That money could be make or break. Cori Bush is in legitimate danger here. So this is what we're up against. This is why.
That's fucking horrifying. To be like, yeah, rather than, going after a Republican, I'm going to be trying to knock out a fellow Democrat. That's what I'm going to spend my energy doing.
Democrats and Republicans have no red line when it comes to Israel's war crimes in Gaza. Now, you can also blame ignorance and cowardice. I think this is the case for some politicians like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. But for the most part, I think most politicians who toe the line, they're doing so because they were paid to do so by the Israeli lobby. Palestinians just don't have comparable lobbying power. So this is why politicians in both parties turn a blind eye to their suffering and pretend as if they don't exist. But times are changing, and public sentiment is shifting before our very eyes. The majority of Americans who now support a ceasefire, they're going to wonder why our government isn't supporting the common sense position. And they're soon going to learn that it's because money in politics is, again, the lowest common denominator. And in the same way that the NRA pays Republicans to do nothing about gun violence, APAC pays politicians in both parties to do nothing about Israel's war crimes in Gaza.
Great video by Mike, and good to see that it has been
clean up your room.
Unblocked. No more block. That's good. Kiss M Jolk, Life, the Universe, and Everything. Thank you so much. I deeply appreciate your subbies. It's very kind of you. Always, if you have Prime, you can subscribe for free, by the way. It's absolutely 100% free. It's already included in your Amazon. Rabbi